Good morning. Yeah, this is different. I just want to welcome you. What a beautiful day it is. Sunny outside. Man, when the sun is shining, boy, I tell you, it really is special. And the good news is that with those of us who are Christians, the sun is always shining. And what the world needs then is for us to continue living out that life like Christ so that his light shines through us so that they can see the sun is shining. We want to welcome those of you who are here visiting us this morning. Thank you. This is our family reunion, and we share in this family. And no, this is not typically what we do when it comes to the order, but shaking things up every once in a while, I think, keeps us on our toes. It sure does mine, because I feel out of rhythm right now, too, all right? As a matter of fact, that kind of goes along with the way my week has been. Most of you know that I enjoy music and songs, primarily from the 70s and the 80s. And what will describe what my journey has been like within my mind this week is the title of a Beatles song, The Long and Winding Road. It's been the journey that I've been on in my mind this week. It's the long and winding road. And you'll be able to pick up on that because what I'm going to do is walk you through what my mind has been going through this week on the long and winding road. Because on winding roads, you can't see what's next because there's a curve, and you're coming up to the curve. You don't know what's around the corner until you get around the corner. When you get around the corner, you don't know if there's another curve or not until you show up and, oh, yeah, there it is. That's the way the thought process for me this week has been. It's been a strange week. So hang in there with me, and let's go on this winding road journey. And I promise you that by the time we get to that last stretch, you'll go, oh, now I see how that crazy man got to that place. It all began with a song on XM radio. I've got several stations, of course, programmed, and one of them is called The Blend. Did you guys ever listen to The Blend on XM radio? It's, the 70s and 80s, more of the softer ballad type of music. Well, that was on, and a song came on that immediately took my mind back in time. It was one of those just quick, man, that song shoots me back, and I'm almost visualizing that moment in my life. I'll tell you what the song title is, because it does have a lot to do with where we get to that final stretch in the winding road. But I went back to my early 20s, and it was at that time that I worked for a security company. And the first part of the story, many of you have heard before, but there's a part 2 to it that I haven't shared. So the security company I worked for at the time, they were housed out of Southfield, but most of their accounts were in downtown Detroit in the 80s. Detroit was a different beast in the 80s than it is now. My assignment at the time was to be security over the midnight shift for a warehouse in downtown Detroit. With no weapons, by the way, just there I am in an empty warehouse trying to keep it safe, whatever. My boss then comes to me and says, hey, listen, I want to reassign you to the Fisher Building. And I said, man, that's a fantastic thing. I'm going to go to the Fisher Building, downtown Detroit, late shift. I just go through the floors, pull on a few doors, then spend the rest of the evening in the security office. Sounds great to me. While I was there, one night he comes to me and he says, listen, you're going to be reassigned tomorrow because there's a special event. You're going to go to a hotel right by Detroit Metro Airport because the World Wrestling Association is coming into town, the pro wrestlers, and you're going to be assigned to be security for pro wrestlers. Wow, that sounds great. So I show up the next day to this hotel, and we get all lined up, and the security officer that's in the front of the line, a limo pulls up, and whoever comes out that door, that security officer is going to be in charge of security for that particular wrestler. Now it's my turn. I stand up. Here comes the limo. The door opens up, and it's Hulk Hogan. I'm going to be security for Hulk Hogan. He gets out of the limo, reaches out his hand to shake my hand. How you doing, brother? That's the best Hulk Hogan I got, all right? So he shakes my hand. As he's shaking my hand, there's another person getting out of the limousine. It's Andre the Giant. So now I'm going to be security for Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. Yeah, I know. Like, I can do anything they couldn't do to keep themselves safe, right? But my job is to really keep the crowd away, lead them to the table that they're going to eat at. We're going to go, and I'm going to keep the crowd away from them while they're eating, and then I'm going to safely get them back to their hotel room, and then I have fulfilled my assignment. It was a great time, a great time. I get back to the security office the next day, and my boss says, now you're not going to just be walking around the Fisher building. You're going to be going into the Fisher Theater and being security during the musicals. Well, I'm thinking to myself, hey, this is great. Winding road, hang in there with me. We're going somewhere. I love musical theater. I was in musical theater in high school and in college, and so now I get to see Broadway shows for free, and usually the theater crowd isn't all that rowdy, so it was really a cool assignment. And the Broadway musical that was coming to the Fisher Theater at the time was Cats. Remember Cats? And I thought, this is fantastic, because the culminating song in that is Memory. Midnight, all alone in the moonlight. Remember the song? It's a great song. And so there I am, and she's singing her song, and it's all about memories. It's all about going back in time and remembering when she was young and vibrant, and the light of her life was shining brightly. And it's really a serene, just a really cool song. And I heard it night after night after night. I was really familiar with the song because Barry Manilow did a version of that song that I knew before I even knew Cats did the song. That's the song that came on the radio this past week on Blend. Memory. And that got me to thinking. It's Memorial Day weekend. Memories are important. Remembering things really is crucial. And that song got me to remember a time gone by that actually led me to a place where I'm thinking about time in the present. And then from there, I went around another curve and said, well, wait, okay, so it's Memorial Day weekend. What about memorials? I typed into the internet, how many memorials are in the state of Michigan? And they can't count them. There are literally thousands and thousands of memorials throughout just the state of Michigan. You know, the statues, the horse with the guy on top and the sword, or the plaques that you find on the side of the road or at certain locations. Or even when you go to the park, there's the park benches with the signs on them. They are memorials. Matter of fact, we have that here in our church building, don't we? Memorials, plaques on benches to then commemorate people who were really key and wonderful people in this congregation. Memorials. And so then that got me to thinking as I'm driving down this road, this winding road, how many of those memorials have I driven past, not even paying attention, not knowing that they were there? I would imagine in my life, being a lifetime Michiganian, I have driven by thousands of memorials and didn't pay attention. I'm sure that there have been several memorials that I recognized very quickly and briefly, like, oh, there's a plaque, and I just kept right on going. And then there's some that I'm more familiar with, like up in Whitefish Point in the Upper Peninsula. There's the Edmund Fitzgerald Museum there, and it's got the bell from the Edmund Fitzgerald, and you go in and Gordon Lightfoot's song is playing. I won't sing it because it might stick in your head the rest of the day. Dee, 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 dee. Okay, anyway, so you go in there, and there's all these stories. There's this memorial about the men who faced such difficult times, and they died during that amazing storm, and the family members and the consequences to those family members that took place and still takes place in their life today. And so when I'm there, it's a somber moment to be drawn back into, and it becomes personal. The memorial now that's to remember that time in history starts to pull forward in my life and makes it personal for the loss that the families had to face at that time. And memorials can do that when you allow yourself to be drawn in and start to research and read a little bit about things that have gone by in the past, and they're pulled forward to have you go, wow, that has at least a little bit of an impact. But I'll be straight with you, for most memorials, and I think this is true for you too, as soon as I leave Whitefish Point and start heading down Highway 2 again, I'm like, I don't even think about it anymore. I mean, it was an emotional moment at the time, but then now I'm on to the next thing. I'm afraid that that's what happens to many of us when it comes to those memorial times, where we may be drawn in for a moment and recognize them. Well, like, I don't know, the Lincoln Memorial. You're familiar with that? You see that, and you may take a pause for a moment and go, hey, man, he was assassinated, and the war that went on back then, and all the loss and all the pain and all the sacrifice that went on during that war, and all the hatred and bitterness and division in the nation. And then when you allow yourself to start thinking and making it personal, you realize that today we are still in the midst of the battle. That all those things that took place back then, several of the battles have not ended yet to this day. There's still a fight for people to have equality and to be recognized as, God created all people equal in his eyes. There's still a battle today that we face, and there's still such, disconnection and disunity in certain sects of this nation because of all the things that memorial reminds us of. But like most of us, I don't think of the Lincoln Memorial very often, and nor do I really think of what it stood for and its impact today. The Bible is filled with memorials. The ark, stones, a serpent, memorials. And I'm not quite so sure that we think enough about them and remember them. Matter of fact, I'm pretty convinced that if we start opening our eyes to see some of the memorials that God calls for us to remember, it'll really have a huge impact on how we live our daily life. I'll give you one that I think that most of us don't think much about, and that's the remembering of what took place in the garden. And you may think to yourself, well, the Garden of Eden doesn't have much of an impact on me now, at least in some sort of ways, I guess that it does. But wait a second. How many of you guys labor and sweat at your brow to just make ends meet? Do you know that's a remembrance of a consequence of sin? And it isn't just Adam's sin that made that happen. I mean, let's face it, we're all sinners. And because of that, there is this disconnection from God, that God, he, at the beginning, provided all. He was the great provider for all things. Adam and Eve, all they had to do was just wake up that morning and God provided it all. But they wanted more than what God had to offer. And so they went, hey, that looks good. Let me have a bite. And as a result, there is the consequence of separation from God and having to then earn what you have by work. And I know we joke a lot about it, but you moms out there can understand it's also, thanks, Eve, for that pain. Listen, the pain of childbirth is a consequence of sin. God handed that out. And you're facing the pains, ladies, of the childbirth or those that will have children in the future, not based on her sin alone, but we're all sinners. And so it's a reminder, the pain and the sweat of the brow and having to go to work and trying to make ends meet and having provisions for the family that are responsible, that our work is responsible for those things, are all reminders of the consequence of sin. Now, if we allow ourselves to bring what took place so many years ago, to pull that forward today and make that memorial and remember those things, it does become a life-altering moment every day. How? I don't want to add on to the consequences of sin in my life. I mean, I've got enough going on already with what I've done in my own past and the sweat of the brow and the having to work. And I know that that's a consequence of me turning my back on God. I don't want to add to that anymore. How about you? You see, remembering and memorials as we finish that curve and we're starting to go down the straightaway to this finish line, it's realizing that remembering and memorials, when we make it personal and invest our time into it and think about it, it leads us to a place where we go, wait a second, I can make really practical applications to my life today to move my life more forward in the way He wants me to go, all because He has me have memories of the past. Both what He wrote in Scripture and what I have in my own my own life. And then there's this memorial. I don't know. Maybe you're not like me. I get emotional thinking about it because I'm ashamed. There are far too many times I treat and view the Lord's Supper kind of like I do with the Edmund Fitzgerald Museum. Where when I'm there, I'm reminded of it, and I'm drawn in, and I go into the museum, and I see all the artifacts. I allow myself to be drawn in, but as soon as I get in my truck and leave, then it just poof. And there's no more effect from it in my life. I've done too many drive-by Lord's Suppers. How about you? Where the memory of Jesus Christ and what he did all that time ago becomes a moment like a roadside stop and not something that becomes something that affects me every day. Where I cognitively think about what he has done for me in memory. There's a passage I would love for us to look to, and that's Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 13. For he delivered us from the domain of darkness, transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. This Lord's Supper is a reminder of that. In whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins, and he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether the thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church. And he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself might come to have first place in everything. Things to remember, church, as we take this meal. For it was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, and through him to reconcile all things to himself, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Through him, I say, whether things on earth or things in heaven. And although you were formerly alienated and hostile in mind, engaged in evil deeds, yet he has now reconciled you in his fleshly body through death. Why? In order to present you before the Father in heaven, holy and blameless and beyond reproach. May I never walk by this memorial again. If indeed you continue in the faith, firmly established and steadfast. Now you see, there's the calling. For me not just to have that visit with the Lord at his table, but to take what he has done that this table represents, and the emblems, and the meal, and the communion, and have it be something that affects me every day. And it is by faith. It's my responsibility to place the faith and trust and focus and discipline and purpose to see him and remember him every moment. And not moved away from the hope of the gospel, verse 23 finishes, that you have heard, which was proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, was made a minister. This whole first part of the lesson is to help us with this winding road to get to that straightaway to see the visualization of how we, through our own winding roads in life, have passed by so many memorials as we've gone through life and not thought a thing about it, or the ones that we stop and we go, oh, isn't that nice, and we then move on with our life, that we too, I am convinced everyone here at one time or another has done the same kind of thing with this crucial memorial from God. And may it never be from this moment forward. May today be a transitional day for you where when you take the fruit and you take the bread and you remember that it'll be something that'll have a daily and moment by moment impact in your life. But one of the things that I find is a curve in the winding road that keeps me from seeing this on a daily basis in my life is when I have that barrier of sin that's blocking the view. You know, Jesus is pretty clear in Matthew chapter 5, in our application that we have today, that when we know that somebody has something against us or we've got something against somebody, that we shouldn't just barge on in and do the sacrifice and offer ourselves as if everything's okay before the Father. We should do something about it. Leave that sacrifice and go make it right before you come back and give yourself back to Him to recognize Him giving Himself to you. And I think the same thing is true not just with a brother to brother, but also between ourselves and Him. That when we know that there's a distance, let's not just drive by and go, hey, let me take the bread and the cup. Thank you. It's part of our routine. Stop for a moment and realize just how crucial it is that we go to the Father and say, please forgive me for I have sinned. And what this stands for is your plan to reconcile me to you. May I not take this in an unworthy manner. And that's why we have this offering of an invitation before we take the memorial meal. So that it gives us a chance to really have the introspection and where am I at? And I'm so grateful for what He's done. And Father, forgive me, I have sinned against you. And one of those is that I have not carried what you have done for me as an impact in my life every day. Please forgive me. Help me not have that in my life anymore. I don't want to just drive by your memorial anymore. And so during this invitation, if there is something that needs to be reconciled between you and God and connected to you and somebody else, or connected to you and something that you're struggling with, then we can go to a private place while the folks are taking the meal. We can go to a private place and pray and talk. And we can then commune together when that sin has been released into the one who takes it and washes it and forgives. If you have not given your life to Jesus and you want to have that first meal with Him, first thing is to be baptized into Him, to be washed by Him, so you can commune with Him in a way that you've never been able to do it before. As we stand and sing the song of invitation. I promise I don't have another 30-minute lesson, but I do have a charge. It was very thought of memorials and driving by and forgetting things and then having an emotional experience or a connected experience, but then leaving it behind and moving to the next. I thought it'd be a good idea to just give one practical way that we can remember. I'd like us to, with every person that we see that that person is created in the image of God within. We see people all the time, and they can be a memorial then for us. If we can get our mind to be trained to then see somebody for the soul and the value they have in the eyes of God, and then have that then lead us to shine his light with love in their life. To be proactive in connecting to them, because that's what he did for us. He didn't love us from a distance. He came to us face to face. And now our calling as the body of Christ is to do and be the same. And having that memorial of looking into the eyes of people and going, oh, there's more to them than just what I see. Let me be led to love them like Jesus. That's it for this morning for me. We're going to have a closing song, and it's not going to be a second invitation song formally. But if through this process there is a need for you to tap somebody on the shoulder, or an elder or a minister, and to have some time with us to pray, please let us do so. As we get ready to dismiss with a closing prayer after the song, as we stand and sing.